Why do so many ambitious people build successful businesses, yet still feel anxious, disconnected, overly critical of themselves, and emotionally exhausted? In today's conversation, I sit down with DJ Paris, the vice president of Kale Realty and the host of the leading real estate podcast, Keeping It Real: Secrets of the Top 1%. And in this conversation, we unpack the vulnerable, real, emotional realities of high performance, entrepreneurship, relationships, self-awareness, and resistance. DJ shares what he's learned after years of training and interviewing hundreds of top producing real estate agents and entrepreneurs, why so many high performers become addicted to stress and productivity, and how unresolved internal patterns quietly sabotage fulfillment, relationships, and peace. Now, don't let DJ's humility fool you. He's a savage. He is an incredibly high producing, high performing individual. He's the vice president of business development at Kale Realty. And in the last 15 years, he's taken his team from just a few agents to over 800 agents. And as I mentioned, he's the host of the Keeping It Real podcast that has over 800 episodes. And get this, nearly 10 million downloads. DJ is a must follow on social media. You'll see his links below. But for now, take a breath, get something handy to take notes with, and get ready to dive into a candid, vulnerable, action-packed conversation about how to achieve and sustain next level success. DJ, you've spent years around top producers, whether it be training them or interviewing them. And I'm curious to know, in your experience, who tends to struggle more emotionally? Is it the agent who's trying to become successful, or is it the one who's already achieved success trying to maintain it?
Well, it's an interesting question because the dropout rate in the real estate world is very high. So I don't know what the actual numbers are. There doesn't seem to be a good grasp of them, but we could estimate roughly 80% of people who try real estate as a profession, whether it's part-time or full-time, end up leaving the profession within a couple of years. Why is that? Well, mostly it's because they don't generate enough revenue to continue doing the job. And so the question you posed is, and we're not talking to the audience who has left, and we're talking to people who have stayed. So I guess what I have learned over all these years is that everybody has problems, and problems do not go away. And the ability to coexist with challenge, I think, is a skill in and of itself, to not expect the waters to be smooth and to learn how to pivot when needed. I'd say that to me, well, you asked where agents are struggling. I think the agents who are struggling the most are the ones that are tied to their previous behavior.
So I hear resiliency in listening to you. Like, I love what you said, like that ability to sit with problems or challenges because they're going to be there no matter your level of success, your level of income. Have you observed that that's trainable, or is that an intangible somebody is born with?
Yeah, I always, it's funny. My father has two friends who are cardiologists in the same practice, and they're partners. And one of them will tell you there's nothing you can do about heart disease. It's all genetics. It's going to hit you when it hits you. The other one says, no, you can actually stave it off. There's data to suggest. These are two very highly respected guys, and they can't agree on this very specific objective kind of thing. Can we influence heart disease? So I don't know if it's trainable or teachable, but I'm going to die trying to continue to develop
Mm,
those skills. So what I think is, what I know for sure is that skills, people can get better at things. I know that for certain. So what I always think is really interesting is thinking about, what do I want to get better at? Right?
mm,
So if I look at my life and I chop it up into different categories, we have my romantic life, my family life, my business life, my friendships, my physical health, and you could fill in some other categories. I could start thinking about, what would I like to be better at?
mhm.
And that to me is the great place to start, is not what do I have, what don't I have? It's what do I want to be better at? And if you, i- if I can continue to think about that from that vantage point of, I can get better at something, then I oftentimes find myself into the solution simply by asking the question. The solution unfolds, maybe not immediately, but down the line.
I like that a lot, and I resonate with like, I break my life up into categories the same. So that's nice to hear that echo, and I find it very helpful to always realign myself if I ever get off track, to make sure these are the big rocks, the categories that are most important to me. Am I doing what I thought I needed to or said I would do in these areas? Because that's what ultimately creates fulfillment. What I think is really interesting too, if we continue to run with this example of resiliency, is it trainable? Is it not? Well, you just embodied a great example of a growth mindset. You're going to die trying to train it, or you're just the utmost optimist that you know what, absolutely it is trainable. And that's the belief I'm choosing to adapt, and I'm going to pour my effort into it. I always come back, a decade ago when like cold plunging came onto the scene. It was,
Sure.
it took social media by storm. It's still everywhere. Many people were doing it for all these anti inflammatory reasons, and there's a whole slew of physical proven benefits. I took a different approach. I wanted to do something every day that made me uncomfortable.
That
That
you
part of
didn't want
me,
to do.
yeah, I was kind of scared. I was kind of dreading it because for me, I knew if I could, eat that frog, if you will, every day, that resiliency was transferable into other areas of my life. So not only is it a trainable skill, it's one now that's transferable when I have to make those sales calls or do that outreach, make that post, record that podcast, whatever it may be.
I think strength training is one of the best examples of this
Yeah.
that we can sort of cement as a metaphor, because it isn't a metaphor with strength training. It's like, if you do an exercise, if you're looking to build muscle, which most of us probably are, you're going to essentially exhaust a muscle beyond its capability, or to its capability, and you are going to collapse that muscle or exhaust that muscle. And there is a pain that is associated with um, a a stick to itiveness that you need
Mm,
to get to that. It's not easy to do the last half push up where you collapse. That's actually the hardest one to do, even if you don't do it, because you literally have to put yourself into exhaustion. Now, why do you do that? Because it creates more muscle. S-
yeah.
But so I know that resistance, to your point, resistance is everything. And I was listening to um, a couple of neuroscientists chatting recently, and they said, for longevity, the best thing that we've figured out is that you always want to be challenged in some way. That's, you're doing some activity that's beyond your capability, whether it's strength training, it could be anything. I mean,
Hmm.
everything's beyond my, if you to look at it, there's always room to improve. But do something that's really challenging that you can't quite do, but it's not hard enough where you want to quit. If you can
Mm.
figure out that range, s- do those kind of activities for the rest of your life, and you will have a very fulfilling life, because fulfillment, I think, comes from the willingness to put yourself in the way of resistance.
Ooh, I like that. Really well said. Fulfill. Yeah, that's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. So then tell me this, as you've then again, you have trained hundreds and hundreds of agents. You've interviewed, I assume, an equal amount, give or take. When you notice those agents and those entrepreneurs who have gotten to that next level of success, whether it's by a metric of number of deals and contracts executed in a year, or it's a financial threshold, what have you observed to be blind spots, common blind spots that hold them back from either sustaining or continuing to build upon that success?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we all need accountability in our lives, I think.
Mm,
And accountability looks different for everybody. We all have our own blind spots. Where do I see blind spots? I think the ego is typically the place where I can confront a blind spot. Now, I don't always, of course, I can't possibly know someone's inner world or what happens when they go home at night or how they treat their family or I can observe maybe parts of their business and I can't observe, the whole human being. So I can't know the full picture. But what I suspect is that they've stopped asking questions about how do I become a better father? How do I become a better
mm,
husband? How do I become a better business partner? How do I become a better agent to my clients? And it doesn't mean you're not good enough as you are. It means how can I do more? How can I be more? How can I give more value to the
yeah.
people in my life or the things that I care about in my life? So I think when you stop asking those questions, it can be very uh, defeat. Well, it can be a pacifying thing that if
Mm,
all of a sudden you coast on. Well, I'll tell you this. I have found that whenever I've achieved a major goal, this is, I don't think unique to me. I'm sure your listeners have had an experience like this, where you want to achieve this massive goal and you achieve it and you get really depressed.
mhm,
Um, and it's not so obvious why you're depressed. And this has happened to me. And so I know that it is the journey is really where it's at. Meaning the resistance is where it's at. Meaning
yeah.
I have to continue to ask questions about how do I solve problems. So how do I get better is basically asking how do I solve a problem. And solving
Yeah.
problems is what we're here to do. So agents who are not constantly trying to solve problems, and I don't mean solving problems for their clients, I mean solving problems for their business, their fulfillment, their happiness. Um, that's where I see agents
Yeah.
struggling.
So that's interesting. And what I've noticed in my work, because fortunately or unfortunately, my work involves getting to know the whole person, very
Yeah.
intimate, deep relationships in a one-on-one private coaching environment. What I have observed is at certain levels of success, and I'm curious your observation here too, people fall into the habitual pattern of creating problems just to be able to solve them because it feels familiar to recreate these patterns of stress, fear, anxiety, false sense of urgency, because that inevitably over time has become a safety net from doing some of the real different or more resistance providing work to get them to that next level. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah. So my wife grew up in a family where if you were in conflict and you were
Hmm.
arguing, to leave the room was like ultimate disrespect.
Okay.
Whereas I grew up in a family where uh, to stay and fight was actually disrespect. So we come
Mm,
from these two different backgrounds. So what happens is when we get into conflict, I want to go retreat because that's what I learned how to do and calm down so I can come back. She wants to come follow because she's like, "Why are you leaving?" She feels abandoned. I feel suffocated. And
mm,
so we have to create a new pathway. And
yeah.
and and so we're figuring that out. But it is interesting how people sort of, what they learned growing up dictates their actions today.
Absolutely. And if we run with that, because I think it's a great segue to what I wanted to ask you as well, we both know that like the hustle grind culture in entrepreneurship is as strong as ever. In my experience, it's like an nth degree stronger in the real estate world. I mean, agents are just always available, whether it's for their clients, prospective
Yeah,
clients, their team members, they're answering emails at 5 a.m. or
right.
1 a.m. What have you noticed be an inevitable breaking point, or finally seeing someone learn the hard way that they have got to stop that behavior? Like, why do they get to that point, and what have you seen them do to right that ship?
Yeah. So with real estate, there aren't as many, you know, guardrails around time.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
agents, like you said, decisions get made by families to buy and sell homes in the evening. So that, of course, gets translated into texts and emails and phone calls late in the night.
Yeah.
And the really successful agents pick up those phones and they don't put their phone down and say, well, I'll deal with it tomorrow. The really successful agents I know pick up that 10 p.m. phone call. And
Yeah.
whether or not any of your listeners agree that that's a good idea is irrelevant, because that's what they do.
Hmm.
And what that could mean is could be wonderful for a family, and it could be terrible for a family, right? The family has to be on board with a real estate agent's lifestyle and work style. And this is how my clients interact with me. This is what will happen if I'm at a baseball game and watching a game and a deal comes in. This is what I have to do. Can I get the sign off on all my family members so that, daddy's got to make a business call? That's not an easy ask, but it's honest. And I think that the agents that just try to grind it out and just stay addicted to the actual work and just kind of go, they get that little dopamine hit because that email comes in and they're like, oh, I got to respond to it right away.
Yeah.
We're all addicted to, those kind of hits. And that is that's problematic. So what I always say is everything's got to be intentional, right? So, what does your family need? What do you need? What are do is it good for you to pick up the phone after 9 p.m.? Does it actually make you feel worse or better? And I think, everybody's different. So you have to really have a mindfulness approach where you're checking in with yourself. What do I like? What do I dislike? What do I prefer? What don't I prefer? And I think cataloging that stuff is not so
Yeah.
obvious. There's things I like to do that aren't good for me. So I can figure that out, right? And I can
Yeah.
say, okay, well, I like to play video games at night, and there's nothing wrong with playing video games at night. And I probably shouldn't play them for 2 hours. That's probably too much time away from my other responsibilities. But the childish part of me wants to play video games for 2 hours. Okay. So I have to then come to a more reasonable decision of how can I get that need met of playing a game and still meet the needs of my family, right? So I think these are all just intentional conversations that we have with
Yeah.
ourselves, with others. And if you're not having these conversations, needs are not getting met.
For those of you listening, go re-listen to those last 5 minutes. I think that's gold. I am the biggest advocate for having honest, intentional conversations, just like you alluded to, first with yourself, getting clear on what do I want? Because so many people, to your point, think they want to be available around the clock. And at first, society rewards that. Oh, you're so
Sure.
ambitious. That tenacity is so respectful. And it is until it isn't, because it could run you right into the ground. It could bring an end to your relationship. And my listeners know, I think one of the driving forces to the end of my marriage was I worked 70 or 80 hours a week. I wore it like a badge of honor. I bragged about it. It seems childish and foolish now, but back then I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I had to have the wake up call, the emotional explosion, if you will, to get to where I am today. But those honest conversations have to be had first with yourself so that you can tell your significant other, this is what I want. Are we in alignment? Are we on the same page? And then similarly, you have to be willing to listen and compromise if you do have to have that with a significant other about what he or she needs as well, so you can have that teamwork environment. But that honesty is so crucial to creating a path towards alignment versus, misalignment and incongruency.
I'll share with your listeners a practice that my wife and I have been doing for a year and a half now, and it is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. However, I promise if you do this and you can get both people to uh, to see the value in this, it will improve any relationship. And you know, we're always thinking, how do we improve our relationship? We don't assume we have all the information to be able to meet each other's needs. So what we do is we have a state of the union meeting every week,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes about half an hour. It used to take an hour. Now we've got it down to a half an hour. And here's what we do. And I actually borrowed this from a blog post I saw on the Gottman Institute website.
Say it's Gottman, yeah.
The Gottmans they have all the data. And this is so good, and I encourage everyone to consider it. So, and you can do this with yourself as well. We sit down, we turn off our devices, and we first start by saying 5 appreciations. Over the last week, I have to think of 5 things my wife did that I really, truly appreciated. Maybe she took the garbage out for me one day. Maybe she wrote me a nice note. Maybe she sent me a text. Perhaps she, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just 5 actual things she did. And we go one by one. I don't list all 5. I do one, then she does one. And then she says, "Hey, you did that thing last week that was really great and it made me feel loved." And then I say, "And you did this thing that made me feel loved." So we're doing 10 appreciations, 5 on each side. And we start off with some appreciation, and we say, "Wow, we're doing some good stuff here." Then we move into what's working. What is going well for us? What are we doing really well? So we say, "Oh, well, our communication's good," or you can lots of different things. And then we say, "Okay, that's what's going well." And then we say, uh, "Were there any regrettable instances?" And this is the hard part. "Were there any regrettable
Mm-hmm.
incidents this week?" And this is where you can say, "Hey, a couple of days ago, you did this thing and it made me feel really bad. And I felt angry, or I was scared, or whatever. But you did this thing, and I would really rather you do this other thing going forward. Would you agree to do this other thing, or can we talk about it?" And I will, and then the other person has to sit there, and they cannot be defensive. They have to
Mm-hmm.
accept that person's reality is theirs, and they can negotiate if they need to say, "Well, I don't want to do that thing, but I'll do this other thing." Anyway, you're bringing problems to the table, and it is tough to hear. "Hey, you made me feel bad," is not easy. But anyway, we get through. That's the hard part. We get through that, and then at the end of the State of the Union, we say, "What is one thing that you need this week to feel more loved?"
Mm.
And my wife is a litigator. So she, in particular, this week, she's like getting ready to go to court. And so she's like, "I need some support, that I'm a great litigator." Um, it's like, oh, I wouldn't have known that she needed that unless she told me. So I'm like sending her little messages like, "You're amazing. You're great. Picking juries and deliberating and doing arguments, and, talking to judges, and, and, creating arguments and defending them." So that's what I'm doing because she told me that's what she needs. And then I tell her what I need, and she's doing that as well. So we have this like 30-minute meeting, and it's not easy, but boy, it really brings up all the stuff, the good and the bad that happened throughout the week.
Yeah.
And we've confronted head on, and we move through it, and we try to continue to, you know, see the thing about, I'll say why this is so powerful is it's the appreciations that really make this thing so powerful, because really happy marriages will appreciate each other 5 times for every one, sort of criticism. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what Gottmans have a lot of data on. So we're setting it even up that way in this
Yeah.
weekly thing. So every week I know I'm going to say 5 wonderful things about my wife to her face
Yeah.
authentically, and I'm going to hear 5 things that she likes about me. And it is not, this is not fun. I don't enjoy doing this 30-minute process. It's actually something I actively will say, oh, we'll do it later. We'll do it. Like, I actually avoid it. And thankfully my wife is like, no, we need to do it. And so because it can be very painful. Um,
So
and yet
pause
it's,
right there. I'm curious. Like, I'm going to challenge you because that's just in my innate ability. Like, why do you feel you avoid it? What is the painful part of the experience for you personally in this situation?
yeah. So I don't like to be, I don't, it has to do with being validated as, I don't want somebody confirming that I'm a bad person or that I've
Mm,
done a bad thing. I've been a bad boy kind of thing. So
yeah.
if my wife is disappointed in me, if she says, well, I didn't feel loved in this moment because you did this thing, then all of a sudden I feel like, oh, well, I failed, and so I have
Mm,
judgment around that. So,
yeah.
and she's not saying the way she's not interpreting it the same way I am, but,
Yeah.
that could be very challenging for me.
Man, I appreciate you sharing that. And funny enough, it's Tuesday night when we're recording this. It's my weekly night of our State of the Union. So
Oh,
I'm a
nice.
huge Gottman fan.
Great.
It is not the most comfortable experience. I do echo that. And also, I echo how rewarding it is, how much opportunity for connection and closeness it brings as a result. And so it's interesting. Like, you just spent some wonderful time talking about the value of your relationship, placing a precedence on it. Yet I also know candidly how career driven you are, how much you love to make an impact in the world for your
Yeah.
company, for your team members. Like, can you have a successful, healthy marriage and a successful, thriving business?
I certainly hope so. I've had, I think so. I certainly don't have the answer to that, but I think, it's funny. Years ago, somebody told me balance is impossible. So don't try for
Hmm.
balance. Just try to get close.
Mm.
It's like, shoot for 80%. If you can get 80% of the way towards anything, yeah, you're probably doing pretty good. So I shoot for 80%. 80% of the time we do our weekly check-in. Sometimes we
Hmm.
miss it. It happens. 80% of the time I eat right. 80% of the time I try to, make my business calls. Um, I don't shoot for perfection because I'm not going to hit it. I'm just too flawed as a human. And I just shoot for most of the time. And so that's kind of my mentality is, I mean, I always want to do better, but is not to strive for perfection, just to strive for consistency.
I like that. And for you listening, have an imagination. Many people listening probably have some strife in their marriage, their key
Everybody does.
relationship. Yeah, specifically those who are so married to their business or whatever it is they do for a living. And, for me, I learned the hard way. I used to, openly share, like, with my wife at the time, like, you're most important to me, but it was a lie because I hadn't had the honest
Right.
conversation with myself yet that my business was my baby, my wife, my everything. So I was out of alignment. I was incongruent, dishonest because I was saying what I thought she wanted me to hear, which any good husband is going to try to do in those moments, but it wasn't truthful. So in that ending in a divorce for a long time, candidly, I carry the belief I can't have both. It's either a successful business or a
Yeah.
successful relationship. And for a while, that led to some pretty poor relationships until I started to understand, because, with age, with time comes wisdom. It's about doing less better. And I've taken that to,
Yeah.
doing less in my business and doing it far better than I ever could versus doing a million things. And I don't need to be the best at 15 things. I don't need to be perfect at everything. I can be a really good boyfriend and I can be an incredible coach and entrepreneur. I don't have to be the best 15 other things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I tend to go wide and shallow, and it's better
Yep.
to go narrow and deep, right? And
Yeah.
I think, I mean, perfect example. So I started playing after playing guitar for 30 years, just kind of screwing around, playing in bands and, just having fun. I decided to take it more seriously. And I said, I want to learn classical guitar and flamenco guitar, which is just a whole different animal. And so I
Okay.
started taking lessons, but I wasn't practicing. But I said, okay, I have to figure out the rhythm of this because this is so precise. There's no screwing around. There's no just, strumming along to some chords. Like this is serious business. This is very difficult, and it's precise, and you can't just, it's not, just playing a fun rock and roll song. So I said, "Oh, this is good for me because it's now taking something, making it challenging,
Hmm.
and but I struggled to, and continue to struggle to build a rhythm. So
Mm.
I struggle with that. I struggle with lots of things. I struggle with making my outbound phone calls. I struggle with making my podcast episodes. I I love Anthony Bourdain before he died, had said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, the true something to the I'm paraphrasing, but something like, my true self wants to sit on the couch, smoke pot and watch cartoons all day. He's like, my goal is to outsmart that guy. Like every day I have to outsmart that guy. And I felt so connected to Anthony Bourdain because I went, I know that guy. That is me. So every day is a battle. And
Yeah.
that isn't to say that it isn't a battle that's insurmountable, but
Yeah.
every single day um, is a battle against resistance. And
Yeah.
I can set it up to make it easier. I can wake up and look at the sun and say, "Oh my God, I got another day." Like a lot of
Yeah.
people didn't. How fortunate. How grateful am I that,
Hmm.
I've been bestowed this time, and I can set myself up for success. I can stack all these positive. Oh, I have this amazing wife, and I've got 2 cats and a dog, and I've got, I can pay my bills this month, and all of the things that make me feel good. But then the real work is going to come, and it's going to be like,
Hmm.
but can you do the hard thing today? And the
Yeah.
hard thing is always the hard thing. It's picking up the phone, making my dials, doing those push-ups, not spending when I shouldn't, and resistance is the key. And it's just putting yourself in the pathway of pain that's healthy pain, I think, is the key
Yeah.
to life.
Well, so I'm curious, like, what are some of the invisible routines or the habits you have that prepare you to have every opportunity to win the battle against that? Some people call it the higher and the lower self. Like, what do you do to give yourself the best chance of victory that day?
Well, there's a lot of data on this with stacking positives. So we
Hmm.
know that sort of neurologically, neurochemically, the more you can stack these wins, as small as they may be, shockingly, making your bed feels good,
Hmm.
even though it's kind of a silly thing if you
Yeah.
objectively think about it. It doesn't really make sense. You're going to get into it later. Who cares? No one's coming over. But for some reason, when you make your bed, it feels good for most of us. If you floss your teeth, it feels good. There's things that you can set yourself up for success, which is you should celebrate everything you do that's good for you. And you should, hey, it's all about attitude, I think. Look, you can look at the new day and say, "Oh God, I've got to." It's raining, or you can look at it and say, "Oh, maybe the sun's not here today, so I have to create my own, light or happiness."
Mm.
But the point is, it's all made up. We make up our own evaluations of things. So it's all just nonsense. So there's no one truth. The sun's
Yeah.
out. It doesn't mean good or bad. It just is. And so we get to choose. So what I found so interesting, and I think top performers really understand this, is they accept what is
Hmm.
and they decide what it means. They choose
Yes.
what it means.
They
And
tell a
you
better
obviously,
story.
they tell a better story.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. And, what's interesting is I find so many leaders are literally the ones creating the vision, setting the tone, building the culture for their team, for their peers. Yet somewhere, for some reason, they get stuck telling these negative, nasty stories to themselves that inevitably lead to a lack of self-care, a
Yep.
deterioration of their relationships, an erosion of self-trust. So as you're listening, just really pause and reflect on what DJ shared. Like, there's a level of acceptance and a level of just understanding, challenges, resistance is going to be there. What story are you going to tell yourself about the challenge and about your ability to overcome the challenge?
This is why we always need to continue to do our own work, because every single person listening right now, including myself, is locked into their current level of bullshit. We all have bullshit. We all have something that we're being completely we just haven't figured out yet. And it's not working for us, and we
Yeah.
don't like to talk about it, but it's there. And maybe, after 7 drinks we'll talk about it to somebody, or but it's really, we all have stuff that is unresolved. And the reality of it is if you continue to work on yourself, you will always find problems because they always exist, and you will always build skill if you look in the right places. So
Yeah.
you it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Like, you get better, you learn more, you are a better, more functioning human being, but you have to be willing to stand kind of naked in front of the mirror and say, like,
Mm.
what's not going so well right now. And that, it seems to be very hard for people some people to do that.
Yeah.
And look, trust me, I get it. There's things I don't like to look at. Um, and I but if you can force yourself into the pathway of fear, that's what it is. If you can just stand in fear and realize it's not going to kill you,
Yeah.
but and again, when I say fear, I mean something that's healthy for you that you're
Hmm.
scared of.
Of
If
course.
you can do that, and if you can't do it, get a buddy to help you. Get somebody to prop you up and say, you can do this with my help. That's
Yeah.
like getting a coach, hiring Paul, right? We all need help, and
Yeah.
but we need somebody that's going to push us into the fire a little bit, and realize, oh, I'm not going to get burned. You know,
Absolutely. So I'm curious because I know you are such an advocate of doing the work. You have the courage to look inward, to ask for help. Has there been a season in your career or just personally where outwardly things looked great, they looked successfully, but internally you felt stuck, disconnected, or out of whack?
absolutely, yeah. I feel that way often, and I have to really, my default emotion is criticism. So I am
Mm.
often, my default is not everything is great. My default is everything is sucks and I'm not doing it
Mm.
well enough. That's what my brain does. That's what I learned how to do growing up.
Okay.
So I have to override that.
Yeah.
But yes, so I wake up with that. And
Mm.
then I have to go to work and I have to say, okay, well, is that going to help me in my day to have
Mm.
these critical, if I see, by the way, we have interpersonal relationships, and if I if I bring these criticisms to others and I say, oh, by the way, you also are not doing this thing in the correct way, that damages interpersonal relationships. So
Yeah.
if it's damaging interpersonal relationships, it's probably damaging me too if I'm doing it to myself. So the point is I have to realize what I'm doing. Okay, I'm a critical person. I'm kind of a negative. Believe it or not, people think of me as this happy, affable person because I showcase that on my
Yeah.
podcast, which I really truly am happy when I do these. But when the mic's off, I'm kind of a dour person, but that's okay. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I can rise above it because I can say,
Mm.
okay, well, that's just my central nervous system. It's just the way it's wired up. And I get to choose what it means. I get to choose how
Yeah.
to get unstuck. And but the trick is you have to know you're stuck. So I have to keep like guardians at the gate of my uh thoughts and beliefs
Yeah.
to some degree. Or I have to be like, nope, nope, that's not real. That's not true. I have a lot of that's not real and that's not true sort of
Mm.
going on because if I just believed everything I thought, I would be pretty depressed.
Do you have some form of like a stillness or a reflection practice that
I
helps? I mean,
do.
you just I admire your self-awareness, your courage, your vulnerability. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, mindfulness. So John
Okay.
Kabat-Zinn kind of created or named it. And what mindfulness is, and the best way I've heard it explained is from oh well, it doesn't matter. The best way I've heard it explained is if you're sitting at a poker table and you get dealt a hand and you don't like that hand, you can wait for another hand. So it's like this idea of your thoughts are they come and go. A lot of what happens is automatic based on, past experience, childhood, wiring, whatever. And so when we observe our own thoughts, we realize we are not our thoughts. We exist outside of our thoughts, and thoughts come and go. And some of them are helpful, some of them aren't. Some of them tell me I'm worthless, some of them tell me I'm great. Uh,
Yeah.
some of them tell me all sorts of things that are true and untrue. So
Mhm.
I have to have an independent, objective, sort of wiser part of myself to
Yeah.
oversee. It's kind of like in that movie with what's the movie with all the different emotions and the Pixar film.
Oh
Um,
my good. I know exactly.
yeah,
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
Yeah.
Both of those movies, there's a sequel. They are so it is actually really really a smart movie because you can dial things up and down.
Hmm.
But this idea of being aware of, oh, you know, oh, the reason why I feel down is because I grew up in this family and this was the thing that happened to me and whatever, it's
Yeah.
fine. That's just what happened. Okay, well, I'm not going to let that necessarily ruin DJ's day today because of an
Yeah.
experience he had when he was 6. Now, he had a bad experience at 6 and it sucks and it's not going to get fixed and it just is what it is. And it's okay. It's okay
Mm.
because it's not happening right now and it
Yeah.
happened then. And I can give DJ the resources he would have needed back then to confront that
Yes.
thing. So it's it's all work, it's all hard, but
Mhm.
everything's hard, right? So I don't know.
Everything worth having and experiencing. Yeah, I think that's great. And
Everything's
I
hard.
agree. Just that whether you call it meditation, mindfulness, journaling, breathwork, just some form of what I call a daily practice of silence, stillness, and
And I'm sorry, I
solitude.
didn't answer your
Yeah,
question, which was what do
that's
you do?
okay.
I'm sorry. Here's what I do. I apologize. I went on a crazy long rant. Here's what I do. I check in with myself and I say,
Uh-huh.
what am I feeling right now? I
Mm.
try to imagine myself standing outside of myself. So
Okay.
this just helps me sort of do it. I imagine I sort of push my wise self to the left of me for some reason. And I
Mm-hmm.
look back at DJ and I see all these thoughts that DJ's having, but I'm not DJ in the
Mm.
moment. I'm this other DJ. And I see that and I have compassion for that DJ because he did have good and bad experiences happen to him through his life. And his brain is telling him that he's worthless, and sometimes that he's good and he's bad.
Yeah.
And I can and then I can be the final arbiter of truth, but I have to be outside of
Mm.
those thoughts. So I am
Yeah.
just checking in, going, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And is it true? And what I
Mm.
find is most of the time it's not. The thoughts I think are not true.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I don't want to speak for you, so chime in a moment, that you do this in a calm state. And the reason I bring that up is for
Yes.
you listening, if you're liking that example, that framework DJ shared, which I'm a big fan of, make sure you're getting into a calm state first, because your first default reaction to answering the question, is this true? If it's coming from an emotionally charged place because you're anxious and angry and overwhelmed in the moment, you're going to have a tough time filtering what is true and what's not. So whether it's breath work or just sitting in silence beforehand, allow that to be the foundation at which you build your practice off of.
Yeah, everybody should learn ways to get into what's called the parasympathetic nervous system response, which is the
Yeah.
rest and digest. It's the
Hmm.
antithesis to the fight or flight response. So fight or flight is, hey, something really serious is happening, and what the body does is it actually shuts down non-essential
Yeah.
functions to just uh, uh, attuned for survival. So
Hmm.
basically, what happens if you're all wired up and you're angry, or you will not have access to empathy. You won't have access to your prefrontal cortex, which is where higher reasoning comes in. So Paul is so absolutely right. It's a funny thing. We have a well, we don't always do it, but we have an agreement in our house: never fight when you're angry,
Hmm.
because if you're angry, you are not going to find empathy.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we're not perfect at it, but at least we understand. Don't fight when you're angry. You're not supposed to
Yeah.
fight when you're angry. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me this: your podcast has close to, I believe, 100 million downloads lifetime. You have taken your team at Kale from just a few agents to around 800.
Mhm.
Two incredible feats of success. What do you most attribute those successes to? Maybe better said is, what's your superpower?
Yeah, I would love to tell you that it's some innate skill that I have that others don't. It is just consistency. I truly
Mm.
believe that. I don't think I'm any more special, more talented in those two particular instances. The things I'm actually best at is like writing humor. So if we were to go to like what is DJ actually truly gifted at, it's writing comedy, but that's not what I do
Oh.
for a living. So these two instances of podcast and also business, I am I am a creative guy. I am not somebody who really has any business being in the real estate world, because it's not my forte. And through consistency, I've been able to carve out a little niche for myself. And it's
Yeah.
not because I know more than others. I maybe just, people say, how did you get so many listeners? It's like, well, I did it for a year with no listeners. So, and then I did it for a second year with no listeners. And then I did it for a third year and I had some listeners. And then, it's just, I just kept doing it because it was good for me.
Mm.
And I don't even know how many listeners I have now. And it's more than I used to have, but I still want more because I want to hopefully impact more people. And I'm grateful that you allowed me to come on to talk about this.
Absolutely. So let me get you out of here on this. If someone listening to our conversation today feels deeply stuck, maybe they
Yeah,
feel addicted, attached to just the grind of more, more, more,
sure.
what advice would you share with him or her?
You have to get a coach. That's
Mm.
that's the key. Your brain cannot solve those problems on its own. I'm sorry to tell you, there's not a book that'll do it. The brain that created the problem is not the same brain that solves the problem. So you need a
Oh.
second brain. And the reality of it is, I, maybe you get struck by lightning once and then you can solve a problem. Okay, fine. Most of us most of us can't do that. So the honest answer is you get somebody else who can see things more clearly than you can, and you follow their advice and you do what they tell you.
Mm.
And I wish it was more interesting than that, but that's pretty much it. At least that's what I do. I just go, how do I
Yeah.
do this thing? And then I go, okay, I guess I got to do it. So
Well,
I have
I love what you said though. Success is simple. It's doing the same boring, simple things over and over again. That, over time, through consistency with spurts of intensity, is what leads to lasting, significant, sustainable success.
100%.
DJ, where can everybody go to connect with you, to listen
Yeah,
to the
you can
podcast?
find me anywhere. I'm on all the different social channels. My full name is actually Delphin, Delfin. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's delphin.paris. That's my last name, Delfin.Paris. Or just search for DJ Paris anywhere. You'll probably find me. And I have podcasts and all sorts of things. So would absolutely love to connect with any of your listeners. And I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I'll put all those links in the show notes. DJ, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I hope you found as much value in that conversation as I did. I sincerely appreciated DJ's candor, his vulnerability, his realness every step of the way. And I imagine there's a part of you that feels emotionally exhausted, disconnected from yourself, or perhaps is struggling to communicate, whether with yourself, with your team, or with your significant other. DJ shared a handful of action steps and frameworks that you can begin applying today to reconnect with yourself and continue on your path to being the best you. Make sure you give DJ a follow on social media. Go check out and subscribe to the Keeping It Real podcast. And if you know that there's a part of you that just can't stop feeling that anxiety, that exhaustion, that overwhelm, and you're ready to get back on track and to pursue your potential, then I invite you to use the link in the show notes below to apply for one-on-one private coaching with me. Thank you again for listening. As always, go share this episode. Somebody in your circle needs to hear this message. Share it with him or her. Make today great, and I'll catch you in the next episode.